One of them I think is just premature, but I'll give you three answers. They want to know, what are the Israelites drinking? If all the water's turned to blood, then what do we do with the Israelites? The first answer is, well, God doesn't make the water where they are. They actually have access to water. I don't like that. I think that that's an outside exegetical reading. It's not there in the text. I don't like it because it's premature. What I think we're going to see here in this pattern, and we'll get into it in the next lecture with the frogs, is you're going to see two things happening repeatedly. There is going to be God showing a demonstration of death. Okay, so death is one of those things, be it stench, literal death, death of the fish, but also the stink of death, and proximity. Proximity means, how can I move things close to you? Say the frogs coming into your house, the lice coming on your body. Okay, these two things God likes to use as his pestilence: a reminder of death or an instantiation of death, and then a closeness in proximity, which may have nothing to do with death. And then there's a third step to it: death, proximity, and then separation. It turns out God can look to Israel and go, I'll protect them, and everything else is going to happen to you, and you'll witness how I protect them. That's why I say the exegetical reading where they have fresh water where they are in Goshen, I think it's premature. I think we have to wait for that, because I think it's part of that penitential narrative where God is slowly showing them, I can bring death. That's the first plague. I can bring things close to you that will become the frogs, which I always thought was just the funniest plague. Like, you just got a bunch of frogs going. That's a plague. I mean, you just turned the Nile into blood and death, and now we're doing frogs. But I think the frogs have something to do with the proximity. Once I think we see this pattern of death, and by the way, the frogs also stink like death, but death, proximity, separation, everything makes sense. So that's one why I understand we want a rational explanation for how the Israelites survive. Okay, so I'm gonna bracket that one and just tell you I don't care for it much because I think it's premature. All right, so that's one. I'm not saying it's wrong. I think it breaks a pattern that I think is really important. The second reading I actually like a lot. It's because Pharaoh and the Egyptians have made the Israelites suffer so much under this hardship that this is actually a piece of cake for them. Israel knows suffering. The Egyptians maybe don't know suffering the way in which Israel knows suffering. The Egyptians can't handle this. The Israelites, what have we been told that they have to do? They have forced crushing labor. When Pharaoh asks that they go, make it even harder on them, and they do it. And then what do they keep doing? They keep being fruitful and multiplying. Like the tougher you are on them, the more you make them suffer, the more productive they happen to be. So you can't actually stop them through that suffering. I enjoy that one because it builds in that idea that the Israelites are they are a tough people who will be just fine in the wilderness. They may not be obedient, but man, they know how to suffer here. I like that one a lot. The third reading is really an obscure one. I'm not going to give you kind of the history of the reading. I like it. I don't want to get into the metaphysics of it all, but I enjoy the reading, and it goes something like this. That through God's glory, his power, his energies, that those who are prepared to follow God, those who obey, taste the water as if it were blood, as if it were death. And those who obey, those who disobey, those who aren't willing to listen, taste the water as if it's blood. Those who obey, those who follow God, they can drink the water as if it were in fact water. I don't want to get into the theology behind all of that because it's actually really complicated, a long story. But what that means is the two groups, the Egyptians and the Israelites, experience the water to blood differently, predicated upon their disposition towards God.